Hello and thank you for joining College to Consulting. In today's class, I'm going to go over what a case interview is and why will it determine if you get an offer. Okay, so let's get into it. What is a case interview? Well, a case interview is a test to determine how an interviewee would approach and solve a hypothetical business problem. For instance, you might get a question such as Company X is trying to figure out how to price a certain product. Company Y is losing profitability. They want to know what can they do to grow profits. And Company Z is looking to expand geographically, and they want to know which country they should expand into. Okay? So, although this is just the very root and basic definition of a case interview, there's actually a lot of finesse that goes into it. So here, we're going to go over the structure of the interview. Normally, case interviews are about 30 minutes, sometimes 30 to 45 minutes, but for now, we'll say 30 minutes to make it conservative. So when you start off, you usually don't go into the case right away. There's at least 5 minutes of small talk about the weather or about football teams at schools or just small chit chat. After those 5 minutes, what would normally happen is the interviewer will start to begin the case, and this person will read the background of the prompt. Now, I tell this to my students. I say, don't be afraid of the interviewer starting the case. While small talk is very good and it shows some fit, you should flow with it, but don't try to elongate it on purpose so that you think that there's very little time. Maybe the interviewer would just forget the case and we won't have to deal with it at all. That's not going to happen. The interviewer will have to give everyone a case. So now what you're doing is you're just giving yourself less time to do it. Embrace it. We'll practice so you'll be good at it and you'll be ready for it. It will not be a problem for you. So here's the ballet of how the interview works. You start off with this 5 minutes of small talk. The interviewer says, let's get started, reads a background, says you're working for this company and they're losing profitability and they're looking at these other aspects of what to do and they're thinking about maybe these 3 options. I want you to help the company grow. Okay? So, the most important part is this step 3. Ask to take a minute to collect your thoughts, draw a framework, and get interviewer approval. Poor interviewers will jump into the case right away, meaning the interviewer will talk about the background of the prompt and they will just go into it. And the interviewee will just jump in and will not have any structure at all. This is very, very bad. Now you don't have no game plan, or even if you do have a game plan, you haven't approved it by the interviewer to see if this is a good approach or not. Ask to take a minute, regardless if you need it or not. Take that minute, and what you should be doing in that minute is you should be drawing out a framework. And we'll get into frameworks much later in the course, but you should be drawing out a framework of what your plan of attack is. Now what you can do is you can show that framework to the interviewer, and you can ask if this is appropriate or not. This gives you some feedback if this is the right direction to go, or if you need to change your overall framework, which will save you much time throughout the rest of the interview. Okay, so let's say you do that. The interviewer says, this is perfect, let's get going. You begin the first objective. What you want to do with any objective is you ask questions about it, maybe about the product, the industry, kind of the problems that are going on. You eventually come up to a solution and you close this out. And what I mean by closing this out is every objective you get, you should say, so this is the solution, circle it, highlight it, do whatever you need to do. Say, I think I've answered this. Unless there's anything else, I'd like to move on to the next objective. That is how you close out an objective. You say, I think I've solved this. Unless there's anything else, I would like to move on to the next objective. You do this because you don't want to be hit by something surprising later. For instance, let's say you talk about market sizing and you say, we found the number of people who would potentially buy this product. If you don't ask if there's anything else, which could be great, you found the number of people, but I want to know how many of them specifically belong to company X, then you haven't accomplished the objective. So get clarity, make sure you close it out, and then repeat. So let's say you do this for all of the objectives that you are required to do for the case. Next, before you finish everything, you ask, unless there's anything else to solve, I would like to move on. Okay? And what this means is you initiate the summary. Unless there's anything else, another analysis you'd like to do, I'd like to summarize. This is very good to initiate the summary. What happens is people do not initiate the summary, so it's a very awkward end. They expect the interviewer, the person interviewing you, to initiate the summary for you. That's not going to happen. Sometimes it'll be very awkward and you're not going to really know what to do. That's why you ask that question. Unless there's anything else, I would like to summarize. Now the interviewer says, sure, go ahead, or actually, I want you to look at this part too. It's not a bad thing to ask that, but it always pains me when my students who are starting off, they do a fantastic job and they ask to take a minute and they absolve each objective and then close each one out before moving on, and then it's just this awkward silence because they don't know what to do about summarizing. So initiate that summary and get it done. Okay, so this is essentially an outline of the ballet of the case interview. Now, remember before I said that it's probably 30 to 45 minutes. Usually it's 30 minutes because you have back-to-back interviews, but let's say it's 30 minutes. That means that you don't really have 30 minutes for a case. You have maybe about 20 minutes. You have 5 minutes of small talk, you do the case, and then usually there's another 5 minutes of chit-chat about what questions you have for them. So you don't have a lot of time. That's why you have to be very structured and very efficient with your time management. All right? So let's go to this next part. Why will it determine if you get an offer? Well, the case interview shows the interviewer several of your skills at once. And if you remember from a previous class, we went over this pie chart on the right that talked about the different aspects and components that recruiters and interviewers are looking for. Organization and structure, communication, asking questions or how you mine for data, creativity, analytical skills, interest, enthusiasm. And on top of that, they're wondering, how would you be in front of a client? And would they want to hang out with you outside of work? So when you're doing a case, try to picture this little checklist in your mind and see if you can check everything off in a positive note. This will help you to not only think about the case, but think about your behavior and approach and what words you're saying, your body language when doing the case interview. Throughout the rest of the course, we're going to go over frameworks in much more detail, as they're the most important thing of the case. So get into that and think about this component as well as the ballet of the overall case interview when practicing cases. Okay? I'll see you in the next class.